So I'm excited today. As I said, Pastor Chris is here, and he is going to share today. And you know, when we were in this series of Thinksgiving, I really thought about him. I actually had him share with our staff because over the past couple years especially, I have watched God do something just amazing in Pastor Chris. And it really all ties into this series, and it ties into a mindset change. It wasn't anything, just this drastic major change. It was things that God began to show him over the course of time, and I don't want to steal his story and everything, but I can tell you this. I have watched Pastor Chris, where 2 or 3 years ago, there were times when he would be carrying weight and stress and just kind of struggling and even questioning, like, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Should somebody else be doing what I'm doing? You know, all of those things. And I've watched as God's begin to move in his life, that Pastor Chris now takes on more responsibility than he ever has before. And he does it with a smile on his face, with joy in his heart. You know, he's helped take over the Oak Hill building and the food distribution and everything. So not only is it Summersville campus, but the Oak Hill building, food distribution, everything that takes place out of that, the construction projects and things that are going on there. He's even came over here and helped oversee a lot of some of the different projects and stuff that we're doing down the children's wing and budgets and things. And the amazing thing is that even though he has more on his plate than he ever has before, he still comes to me and he's like, is there anything I can take off of you? Because he has learned, and what he is telling you today is not something that he is preaching from a place of I read this, or I read this in a book and I think this. This is something I've seen him live and model, and I've seen the fruit and change in his life. So will you put your hands together and welcome up Pastor Chris as he comes to share the word.
Well, it is a honor and privilege to be here sharing today, and I got to thank Pastor Brandon and Melody for just investing, not giving up on me, really, and just to see what God has done. We sang that song this morning, just the gratefulness. I just began to think and just began to just praise God for all that he has done in my life. And some of that has just been the people that he's brought around. And my beautiful wife is with me this morning, and she's never left my side. And that has been the biggest blessing that I could have. My kids are serving. I tell people all the time, I believe I've got the best kids in the world. They are serving faithfully with us, everything we do. And my lovely, wonderful Summersville family. I'm sorry that I'm not there in person, but I'm just so humbled and excited that y'all don't need me. You got it. Take care of this. Appreciate every single one of you and everything that goes on. And so we've been in this series, like Pastor Brandon said, and it's been a very impactful series. I hope that you're leaned in. I hope that you've been listening to what has been shared every single week, and not just as you're listening, but you're starting to put it into practice. There's a passage of scripture in Romans 12:2 that we keep hitting on all throughout this series. I want to read it before I pray. It says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. Today I want to share some of the things that happen. It really happens when we begin to put this into practice, when we allow God to change the way we think, when we begin to really kind of weigh out what have I been thinking, what is the way that I've been thinking versus God's truth and what he has for us. So before we jump in and I share some things, can we pray? Just prepare our hearts to receive what he has for us today. Dear God, we thank you. Again, God, we thank you for your love for us. We thank you for your attention to us. We thank you that you're the one who does the work in and through us. So God, this morning I just want to share from the experiences that I've been living. God, how you have been so faithful to walk me through these things. And God, my prayer is that it really touches somebody else, that somebody else can relate, their heart will be open to what you would have to speak. Because God, it's not my speaking that's going to change anyone's heart. God, it's you. And so God, I want you to speak. God, I'm asking you to speak to us today. And I know that if we're listening, we're going to hear from you. So right now, just where you're at, would you just say, God, I open my heart to you. Speak to me. God, we thank you for what you've done, what you're doing right now, and what you're about to do. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right. Show of hands. Be honest. Summersville, you got to participate. Be honest. How many of you would say that you trust God fully? I mean, just I trust God fully. Yes. How about if I would ask you to raise your hand if you would say that you believe God answers prayer? You believe that? Hands everywhere. Good, good. And what about if I would ask you, how many of you believe that God is your defender, that he's going to take care of you? Okay, good. Hands up everywhere, Summersville. I'm sure hands up everywhere, and that's good. I'm glad you participated because I'm going to need some participation. If you hear something good, I need to hear something from you, okay? If something touches it, I need to hear an amen or something like that because I'm used to, my Summersville people, we're kind of talk during the message, so I need you guys to talk a little bit, okay? Thank you. Listen, there's something, and it's kind of a theme that Pastor Brandon has hit on a few times already throughout this message, and it's just keeps coming back to me as I've looked at these things. A lot of times we say, or we can think something, right? We can think we believe something. We can think that we believe something. But our actions and the way we behave, that's actually going to show us what we believe, right? We can think we've got a belief, but really our beliefs are much deeper than just thoughts. Proverbs 4:23, it says that we should guard our heart with all diligence because from it flows the issues of life. I read this in a little commentary on this verse. It says, this scripture implies that whatever we allow to enter our hearts, if not examined and evaluated properly, will undoubtedly be expressed in our lives and our actions, positive or negative ways, in positive or negative ways. We say, listen, I'm not bringing condemnation on anybody because my hand is raised as well, but we say we trust God fully. Then why is it we live our lives and oftentimes we put him in the back seat? We say we believe God answers our prayers, then why aren't we spending more time on our face praying and asking him and seeking him for direction? We say we believe that God is our defender, God's going to support us, God's going to take care of us, but then why is it that we work so hard to defend ourselves and take care of what people think about us? What we think we believe is not always the truth in what we believe. And so today, I got to be vulnerable. I'm going to be very vulnerable. I'm going to be very open because I had some wrong beliefs. I had some really good thoughts, but I had some wrong beliefs. And these beliefs came from various different experiences in my life. And I really didn't realize I had these beliefs until God began to truly work and show me and reveal. And so these beliefs, we kind of call them ungodly beliefs. And we'll get into really why they're ungodly beliefs here in a little bit, but just right off the bat, I'm going to share with you, listen, I've got a list of them. I've got a list of these things, so I chose 2. All right? So if you want to hear the rest of my ungodly beliefs that God has been pulling out of me, take me out to dinner or something like that. I'll share it with you. But we're gonna hammer 2. But these were pretty big because a lot of the other ungodly beliefs were hinged on these. One of the first wrong beliefs, ungodly beliefs that I was carrying was that I had to perform a certain way to be accepted. Let me say it again. I had to perform a certain way in order to be accepted by people. And I used to cover it up with this great intention of, well, I just really care a lot about people. Listen, this belief and the way I was acting had nothing to do with me caring about people. It was all about self-preservation. It was all about self-image. It was all about being accepted and loved and have favor and all these things with people. It all had to do about me. It had absolutely nothing to do with God. I was insecure in who I was and what I was doing, and that began to just roll over. And this ungodly belief then, it came out in so many of the actions that I had a really hard time telling people no. I had a really hard time, juggling this. I would put work or other people's needs ahead of my own, my family's, my spouse's. I was constantly stressed, full of anxiety in my head, just, okay, what are they thinking? What are they going to do? How are they going to react? And I was always trying to think 3 or 4 or 5, 10 steps ahead. Can you see how that's not healthy? Nor is it godly. What makes this an ungodly belief? We have to go to the Word, right? What does God's Word say about this? Paul writes in Galatians chapter 1, verse 10, he says this, obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I wouldn't be Christ's servant. I called myself a believer, a servant of Christ, but I was obviously trying to put people first. Paul later again in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, he kind of says on the same line, it says, for we speak as messengers approved by God to be entrusted with the good news. Our purpose is to please God, not people. He alone examines the motives of our hearts. I was trying to please God and people, okay? And sometimes it came down to where I wasn't even pleasing God. I was just pleasing people. So my next ungodly belief fed from that, though. Because I was so focused on trying to be accepted and do things and earn my value and all these things, it kind of fed over into another ungodly belief and belief system that I had actually elevated people way too high. I had elevated people to a place next to and sometimes above God. This was particularly with like authority figures, or people I really looked up to and admired, and those I really just genuinely wanted to make sure that I was on their good side. I did this to Pastor Brandon. I had elevated him to a place next to God, and sometimes, yes, even above God. How was I doing that? I wasn't bowing down and kissing his feet and all that stuff. I'm not doing that to people. But my intentions, my motives, I was afraid to make a decision on my own. I'd always go to those other people. What do you think we should do? What is, well, okay, this is what you want to do, then let's go with it. That'd be great. I would constantly be worried about failing. Failure was terrifying to me because I was putting so much weight on not letting somebody down in what they thought needed to happen or what they thought needed to do. It would come to a point where I was just stagnant. I couldn't make a move or decision unless I heard someone else do it. And again, we can, for just a second, you guys are thinking, well, gosh, that's definitely an ungodly belief. How dare you do that? Check yourself. See how many times you do it. Then we'll talk. But no. We can easily run to a bunch of scriptures that I'm sure that are in your mind right now that kind of prove that this is an ungodly belief. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. We know this passage. We've read it a lot. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all that you do. And he will show you which path to take, right? Go to God first. What about Matthew 6, 33? Jesus says this, seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything you need. Seek God's kingdom first, okay? Again, we got that. But here's the kicker. What about Exodus 23? The first commandment, you shall have no other gods before you. I was in direct violation of the first of the 10 commandments when I elevate someone else above God. But you know what? I grew up with all those verses. I grew up with those passages. I knew them. And they still weren't really convicting me or showing me that I was doing this. God had to use something else. I love the prophet Elijah. You read the stories in the Old Testament about the prophet Elijah, and just the fact that he did and operated in some amazingly powerful ways just would blow my mind. I love the story that we hear, the account of when he calls up and has this kind of this face-off with all the prophets of Baal, and he builds these 2 altars and said, all right, all you will pray to your God and see if fire will come down and see if your God answers. And then he's like, but I'm going to pray to my God, and he's going to answer. And went through this whole thing. And I encourage you, if you're not familiar with that, go back to 1 Kings and read through that. It's really amazing. And we read in there that the prophets of Baal lost, okay? They literally lost their life that day. But Elijah, he called upon God. God heard. He answered. He came down in an amazing, powerful way. But the story doesn't end there. Right after that, this happens in 1 Kings 19, very first verse. It says, when Ahab got home, now Ahab was the king, he told Jezebel, his wife, everything that Elijah had done, including the way that he had killed all the prophets of Baal. So Jezebel sent this message to Elijah. May the gods strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you just as you have killed them. Jezebel put a hit out, okay? Put a hit out on him right there. Threatening to kill him, here it is. Verse 3, Elijah was afraid. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, in the town in Judah, and he left his servant there. Then he went on alone in the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. Wait a minute. This hit me. It's feeling like there was a period of time that this story just kept coming back, and God was just kind of pushing his finger. He's like, are you listening? Are you listening? Are you listening? I'll do it one more time. Are you listening? And it finally hit me. I'm like, wait a minute. Why was Elijah so down? Why was Elijah so afraid? He just saw the power, the amazing power of God. He knew God was on his side, but yet he fell in a deep state of depression, and fear came over him, all because of something Jezebel said. See, what was going on in my life, the time that this kept coming over and over and over again? I was dealing with some fear. I was dealing with some depression. I was dealing with just wanting to give up. And yes, I was a pastor at the same time, okay? Let me be real. Pastors deal with things the same way you deal with things. But also God speaks to us the same way he speaks to you, if you're listening. And so I got to start evaluating. God was just saying, hey, why was he so upset? Why was he so depressed? Why was he so afraid? I'm like, I don't know, God. I'd like to know because I'm kind of feeling the same way. Can you reveal this to me? He said, yes, I'm glad you asked. He said, who is Jezebel? I'm like, king's wife? Queen? What power did she hold? I was like, well, in the natural, she was pretty powerful. And there it was. In the natural, she was very powerful. But God was still God. God was still all authority. God was still sitting on his throne. Jezebel did not knock him off in any way. And I saw that in that moment, Elijah had elevated Jezebel to above God. And that opened the door for all these lies to come and start hammering him about who he was, about his identity, about his calling. And God was like, now do you see why I keep bringing this up? Because I was doing the same thing. I was doing the same thing. I had elevated other people around me to above God and not seeking God and remembering who God was in my life and remembering who I am in light of that. See, once our hearts begin to be open, God's going to share these things. God's going to show us. But what do we do about it? And that really is what we've been talking about throughout this whole series is what do we do about these thoughts? What do we do about our thought life? What are we going to do about when God sets this right in front of us and says, hey, here's an ungodly belief that you have. What are you going to do with it? And we've been talking about this, again, all this series, but let's just run through real quick. I'll run through what I had to do. I had to confess this stuff. You got to cast it out, and then you got to replace it. And you have to do all three, or you got to start the process all over again, okay? So confess. Let's just start with that. Aren't you glad? Can we be just for a moment, let's reread 1 John 1:9 with a gratitude, with a heart of gratitude. 1 John 1:9 says, but if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all wickedness. Come on. Aren't you glad? He does that. I don't have to clean myself up. I don't have to cleanse myself. God does that. But I got to confess it. I got to hand it back over. I got to let go of it. James 5:16 says, confess the sins to each other and pray for each other so that you might be healed. So it was one thing for me to pray and confess to God, God, I see this now. Forgive me of this belief that I've been holding on to. But it was another thing. I had to go to some people. I had to go to my wife and say, I'm sorry I've been lifting other up. I'm sorry I've been living this way. I had to go to my kids. I had to go to my church family. I had to go to Pastor Brandon and say, I've lifted you up ahead of God. I'm sorry. Proverbs 28:13 reminds us of this. People who conceal their sins will not prosper. But if they confess and turn from them, they will receive mercy. Oh, that's good. That's good. All right, so we got confession out of the way. God, I am sorry. Thank you for revealing this. Here it is. But we can't stop there. We got to do that next step. We got to cast it out. We got to get rid of and break our ties with these ungodly beliefs. There's another passage of Scripture that Pastor Brandon has been hammering into us this series, 2 Corinthians 10:3. We are human, but we don't wage war as humans do. We use God's mighty weapons, not worldly weapons, to knock down the strongholds of human reasoning and destroy the false arguments. We destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture, say capture. We capture the rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Christ. I was studying this just a little bit to capture, a lot of times you go into a country or something like that, and there's war and battle, and you capture, your prisoners. You remove them from wherever it was you were. Okay, we got to capture these thoughts, and we remove them from our mind. We remove them from our heart. Remove them. They no longer belong there. James 4:7 says, so humble yourselves before God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. That's a promise. There's a condition, but it's a promise. Humble yourselves before God. God, speak to me. God, show me. God, I'm yours. Resist the devil. Not today, Satan. Not today. You've tried that trick in the past, but I cast it out. It's no more. Done. We have the authority to tell the devil to leave us alone. It's time for us to start using it. We have to start walking in it. We have to start recognizing the power and authority that we have through the Holy Spirit to say, no, I'm not bound to that thought. I'm not bound to that belief any longer. But listen, confession and casting out is useless if we don't replace. We have to replace. Can we go back to Romans 12:2? Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think, underlined by me, okay? Changing the way you think. Because it will produce a new person. It really will. Jesus says this, John 8, verse 31 and 32. He said, Jesus said to the people who believed in him, he said, you are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You don't have to be held in bondage. We have to begin to replace these lies, these ungodly beliefs with what? The truth. Because what sets us free? The truth. Jesus' own prayer in John 17:17 says this, make them holy. He's speaking to God the Father. He says, make them holy by what? Your truth. Teach them your word, which is truth. We have to replace the lies. We have to replace these ungodly beliefs. Once we've recognized them, once we get rid of them, we have to replace them with God's truth. Truth for me was that I didn't have to strive for acceptance. My truth, I'm already accepted. I've been bought with the blood of Jesus Christ. I am God's child. I am a son, therefore an heir to God Almighty. I'm already accepted. God has called me. He has chosen me. Therefore, the only one that I answer to is God. He's the only one that I have to look and seek approval for. Now, has he put authority and things and laws and things in place that I need to honor? Yes, I'm going to do that, but they're not going to control me to the point that they were. Truth for me is that I'm loved. Which may seem like such a basic truth, but when you've lived your life striving for approval, my love language is words of affirmation. So now when I go to the Word, I hear God speaking to me. I hear God speaking over me. He's affirming me. I only need to listen to His voice, because I'm not going to get words of affirmation from people all the time. They're too busy dealing with their own stuff. I don't need that. I just need God's voice. I need Him to speak to me. So as I daily put these truths into my mind, they sink down and they become true beliefs. And when I began to do this, Listen, this wasn't an overnight thing. This was over many years and lots of long nights and processing and praying and working through God, but I never gave up because I knew God had something greater. But as I began to walk this out, some things started to happen for me. God began to heal me. He began to show me the roots behind why I was even thinking that. He began to show me and walk through some moments, experiences in my life that I needed to heal. I was hurt. And he began to bring those things out, and in the way only God can, begin to heal and walk through that. The stress, the pressure began to lift. Because it wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about me trying to accomplish and do all these things. No, it was really me going to God and say, God, what do you want to do? God, what is you give me what I need. Here it is. Oh, there's a problem over here? Okay, well, God, what's your plan? What's your plan? Because I don't need to spend this mental capacity, limited as it is, trying to figure this out. God, what is your plan? Is there, oh no, there's something going on with so-and-so over here. Okay, God, speak to him. God, you speak to him. Before I even have to, you speak to him. So when I'm talking to him, that is just confirmation of what you're already saying. I don't have to worry and stress about what they're going to say, how they're going to react. No, it's just, God, you got this. It's yours. These are your people. This is your task. I'm yours. So stress and anxiety and all that stuff begins to lift. And my capacity began to increase. I'm over and do more and oversee things and have more authority and pressure and responsibility than I think I ever have in my life. And it's great. It's great because it's not mine. It's God working through me. And see, the problem was that ministry used to weigh me down. I've been in ministry years and years ago, walked away from ministry years and years ago because of these ungodly beliefs, because of these things that I was carrying. Ministry is not intended to weigh us down in such a way. It's these lies, it's these ungodly beliefs, it's these wrong mindsets, the pressure that we put on ourselves. That's what weighs us down. That's the heavy burden that Jesus talks about in Matthew 11. I love this, and I go to this all the time. Matthew 11:28, Jesus says the same thing. He says, come to me, all who are weary and carrying heavy burdens. And he was really talking to his followers. He was talking to those who had been oppressed by religion, and there's just super religious bonds that were on them that, guys, we still have on us today. We still fight a spirit of religion today that says you have to do this, then you have to act this way, you have to be like this. Again, you're performing. Jesus says, stop doing that. Stop doing it. You're heavy and weighed down, and this isn't enjoyable. This is not life. This is not what it's going to be. He didn't say it's going to be easy, okay? But he said, listen, I'll give you rest. Let me give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I'm humble and I'm gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear. My burden that I give you is light. See, for too many years, I was carrying my own burden. I was carrying my own weight. I was carrying that weight of expectation that Jesus was like, what are you doing? Why are you carrying that? Let go. Come, let me teach you how to do this. Let me walk you through this. And once I begin to do that, then the weight lifts. Yeah, I'm busy. It's all good stuff. It's amazing things that I get to see. It's amazing things that we get to do at our Summersville campus. Amazing stories of life change that are going on all the time. I get to see that. It's amazing things we get to do at our Oak Hill outreach and everything that goes on. Listen, I invite you, if you're heavy burdened, if you're weighed down, if ministry's not fun, if it feels like work, if you're weighing in the expectations and everything that you feel like are on you by those in authority or anybody, I encourage you, go to this passage every single day and ask God to speak to you. Ask God to reveal to you. Hebrews chapter 12 talks about how we must let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. Listen, these ungodly beliefs that we're carrying, it's sin because it's ungodly. And anything ungodly is sin. We have to strip those things off. We got to let it go because we're called to a race. We're called to a lifestyle that's moving forward. And we cannot allow these things to hold us back. We can't allow these things to weigh us down. Now listen, I'll be honest, I've not fully arrived yet, okay? I'm still working through some things. But I know the process. I know what to look for. And God speaks to me and shows me these ungodly beliefs. And if I start opening the door again to let something in, I'm much quicker to shut it. When I begin to feel stress and weight and anxiety come, I'm like, okay, wait. Where is that coming from? What am I doing? What am I starting to believe again that I need to let go of? So my purpose today is really just to say, hey, this stuff's real. What we've been talking about, what we've been talking through, if you'll allow it, if you'll walk through it, God will change the way you think. And He can create a new person through you. Will you do this with me? Will you bow your heads? Just take a moment. I don't want to miss an opportunity just to allow you to ask God. I don't want to miss an opportunity for you to hear what He's trying to say to you right now. So right now, where you're at, just begin to ask God, say, God, what are you speaking to me right now? What are you speaking to me right now? God, reveal, if I've got some ungodly beliefs, reveal them to me. The psalmist says, search me, O Lord. Would you just say that to God right now? Just say, search me. Maybe you have some behaviors that are bothering you. They're behaviors that you know they're not healthy, but you're not really sure where they came from. Ask God. Say, God, why do I act this way? Why do I react in this way? Why, when this person says this, why do I always go into this? Just ask Him to reveal the roots. God, I thank you. I thank you for your truth that sets us free. God, I thank you that when we open ourselves and allow you to examine us, God, that you're right there. You're walking through our healing. You're walking us through this mindset change. You're walking us through the way we think. Because God, your heart is to align our thinking with your thinking. Your heart is to align our beliefs with your beliefs. So God, may we be humble enough to say, God, we need you to help us. We need you to help us. Reveal these things to us. And God, as you reveal these things to us, we are going to be quick to confess, quick to cast out. And then, God, we're going to listen to what you have to say. What is your truth that we need to replenish that empty void now? God, I thank you that we trust you and you never let us down.